Donald Trump received the largest rebuke in the history of federal courts. How big of a rebuke? Donald Trump has now lost over 15,000 motions and cases involving his mandatory detention policy, where it's become the Trump regime's view, an unlawful view based on 15,000 rulings. Imagine violating the law 15,000 times just in immigration-related cases, where if they find someone who they deem to be not here lawfully under the Trump regime's interpretation, they just lock you up. And then they pretty much deprive you of due process and shift the burden to you to file a habeas petition. Oftentimes, once you are able to secure a lawyer, which ain't easy, but there have been some great lawyers helping, file that habeas petition. Then the Trump regime DOJ, which has lost around 15,000 to 18,000 personnel and thousands of lawyers, don't respond to your habeas petition, or if they do, often don't have the evidence that is needed during these habeas petitions to release the person, pending the arguments about why they should be deported or why they were detained in the first place. And so you have judges from Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, Trump's first administration, Trump judges, Obama judges, George W. Bush judges, Reagan judges, all saying, what the hell are you doing? And also, if you're going to do your mandatory detention and basically violate years and years of precedent and law by interpreting something that was supposed to deal with narrow issues at the border, and now you're saying people who were decades get mandatorily detained, you better be prepared to make the arguments when you step into court. You better be at least willing to file documents when you take human beings and you throw them into cages. And then that human being says, I've been thrown into a cage in conditions reminiscent of concentration camps, and I'm getting sick. People are dying. Let's be clear, there are dozens of people who have died in ICE detentions, died. And that's what we know about. And there have been hundreds, if not more, thousands of people who have, depending on the degree of sickness and injury, who have been severely injured or sick as a result of this behavior. And then just think about the stuff the Trump regime pulled. Remember Alligator Alcatraz, which they poured billions of dollars to Donald Trump's oligarch bros over there, only to shut it down. Remember the conditions there where they would have these, of course, if you're going to literally build it in the Everglades, you know, in these conditions, I mean, you're literally like killing the people, rotting. I mean, between the heat and the animals and the mosquitoes and all of these things, and they had to shut it down. The waste, the fraud, the abuse, the malicious conduct, all in the Trump regime. I want to give a hat tip to the fine folks over at Politico, Kyle Cheney, that is. He does a good reporting here. He's been documenting this with his team. 15,000 in 1 year since ICE adopted massive expansion of mandatory detention aimed at people with years-long roots in the United States, people who paid taxes, people who had jobs, people who raised families, parents of U.S. citizens. Nearly all of these 15,000, nearly all, no criminal records at all. Federal courts overruled them 15,000 times. Remember, we're going to go after the criminals. We're going to go after the bad guys. No, these 15,000 cases, mostly all of them, not a criminal record of where it was. It was maybe like an infraction from like 1983. It was like lots of cases like that. And these are the people who the Trump regime is hunting. And let me not mince words when I say hunting, because by now we've reported, and you all know the tragic story of Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, who was here in the United States for 35 years, ran a company, the father of U.S. citizens, employed lots of people, and was here for 35 years. The Trump regime, he lived in Houston. He'd wake up every day, 5 a.m. The Trump regime was out hunting Guatemalans, as they said. They were looking for Guatemalan criminals. And so they saw Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, who's Mexican, and they said, let's go after that guy, basically. No body cams, no anything. They go, and in cold blood, They shoot Lorenzo Salgado Arrojo, round up the workers and other people with Lorenzo, who included his brother and other people, then try to deport them, don't let them speak to lawyers. They then classify Lorenzo Salgado Arrojo as a John Doe. They take away his license and his identity, so the family can't even find out what the heck happened. They learned because they saw a Facebook post of Lorenzo bleeding out and dying on the street. Then the Trump regime tried to cover it up, blame Lorenzo for using his white van and saying he rammed into us with his white van, just totally false and fabricated. And then Tom Homan's been going on the various regime media, and he's been saying it's so unfair. People are spreading such lies and propaganda about us. You all using the same Kristi Noem playbook, the Tom Homan playbook, the scumbag Mark Wayne Mullen playbook. And this is what they do. This is what they do. Hunting people, mandatorily detained, losing in court over and over and over again. I want to bring in Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Substack, and podcast. Harry, it's great to see you. This is just these immigration cases. 15,000 losses. Donald Trump did stock trade 21,000 times in his first, so more stock trades than losses, but still, not the type of numbers that we want to think of in our executive branch.
Yeah, on the one hand, it's a stunningly lopsided. They're getting their head handed to them again and again and again. We're talking about maybe 50 or something. Decisions have gone the other way now. The courts of appeals are split and going against them. So it seems like how breathtakingly incompetent could they be? But what it really is, Ben, is how breathtakingly obstructionist can they be? Because this is the issue that they've decided to just ignore what the courts have said again and again. We've talked about this before, and the Meidas mighty know about it, but to put it again in context, remember, this is where they have promulgated a new interpretation, abandoning the sensible interpretation of the previous several administrations. And what they are trying to say is people, and I want to get to this Texas case, what a blood-curdling event. But the people who've been here 35 years, it doesn't matter. As long as everything isn't stitched up, this administration has interpreted a law to say they are, quote unquote, applicants for admission. There are these provisions under the immigration code that say when someone just shows up and knock, knock, can I please come in? The Department of Homeland Security has some additional powers, including to say, not today, see you later. But once they set foot in the country, everything changes. The administration cannot abide that. It wants to be able to take people, again, people who've been in the country, like this man who had 35 years, 3 children, always paid taxes, etc., and just equate them with people presenting themselves at the border. A, it makes no sense, but B, it makes no sense legally. It makes sense for them because it's tied into the wretched conditions in the detention centers. If you can do this, and they want so badly to do it that they're ignoring the courts time and again, you grab someone, you throw them in the detention center, and the next thing they know, they're in South Sudan or wherever. Their whole claim here is we don't want them even to be able to make a habeas corpus petition so they can at least argue they should be at liberty while the United States tries to process them. They just don't want them out even for a second with an attorney to represent them because they have absolute control, including in these really wretched conditions. And you understated it, the sanitation, the overcrowdedness, they are hellholes, but that gives them ultimate control. But that's because The law gives them extra control for people who haven't come in yet. And this is the issue they try again and again and again and again, and they will not take no for an answer. It's one thing for an administration to take an aggressive immigration position, but then when they're beaten back, you retreat, you follow the law, maybe you petition the Supreme Court and hope they'll take it, as the court will take this case eventually. But what you don't do is just completely ignore it for thousands, tens of thousands of, as you say, human beings. And they are like this man in Texas, where I just have to move to, and because it has all the earmarks of the worst kind of stuff. He's showing up as he does every morning. It's first thing in the morning, bringing his three other people in the van. After he's killed, we have the familiarized story, which in another administration you'd say, oh, well, okay, that's what they say, presumption of regularity. Now it's the opposite presumption. It's a presumption of just flat out lying. And in fact, the little we know, they weren't wearing their body cams, as you say. What the hell is that? That's what we were told in Minnesota. They're all going to wear their body cams. No body cams. It looks like he goes the other way because they block him slowly. And the three people who are with him, you're right. They immediately detain them as well. And they're trying to get them to self-deport, whatever that means. But a lawyer spoke to them individually. Each of them individually said, he was not trying to use his vehicle to weaponize and go after them. The very same story they used with Renee Good that was been completely discredited. And it's all been contradicted. And they've circled the wagons here, and the feds want to take control to do what? They want the Inspector General's office in Homeland Security to investigate the people. And that means no criminal charges, no investigation. Maybe you weren't doing deadly force policy right and you get a slap on the wrist. Oh, but that's okay, because we now learned the FBI is coming in. They've opened a file on the dead man to see whether he actually impeded law enforcement. No, they are pushing everyone else away, and no one is even looking to investigate a possible homicide under state law, serious civil rights violation under federal law. This has all the earmarks of the worst of stuff in Minnesota. And I'll just end with, this detail that you pointed out very appropriately. It's a guy, been here 35 years, raised 3 children, sent them to college, no criminal record, the very kind of person who is achieving the American dream. That's the person who's just very possibly, we got to learn more, but if past his prelude was gunned down in cold blood and then lied about it, that should never, ever, ever happen in the United States of America. But if it does, the justice system should then follow through and do justice. And to all accounts, the DOJ and the federal government is doing the exact opposite, circling the wagons, preventing justice from being done. As a former DOJer, this one really disgusts me, Ben.
Yeah, and when we talk about a tragic, horrific situation, I also always note that there have been dozens and dozens of people killed in ICE detention centers as well. And then if you think about the PTSD and torture that these 15,000, that's a number, but those are people, those 15,000, and those 15,000 have family members. Let's just say 3, 5, 10 people. And so, and the most important thing to me is humanity, Harry, which is, these are humans, these are human, like these are people's lives who are being tortured and forever destroyed. Each 15,000 that we just discussed right there. Even if you were to take the most, I think, cruel and sterilized view that people in the Trump regime, where some of these right-wing people do, that purely view human beings as economic cogs, which I do not think should take place. But if you now say these 15,000 and just assume there's, 10 people's lives who you're destroying by that as well, with family members and everybody who you're just upending. you're also so obviously destroying the economy. Like you're destroying from a rational perspective too. You're destroying lives and the economy. You're wrecking everything, which is why there was a bipartisan immigration bill that Donald Trump killed and destroyed that said, look, we want strong borders, but ICE needs to do not what it's doing now. Border Patrol needs to be at the border. Let's give a pathway to citizenship to people like, people who are here, doing the right thing. Let's take a strong stance against bad guys, and let's, adjudicate asylum claims quickly but fairly. And let's do this. And Trump killed it. And instead, what he does this, and he kills people. And it's horrible. Anyway, Harry, anything you want to say before we go?
Just one sentence, which is he killed it so he could run against Kamala Harris on the immigration issue. The ultimate in cynicism. Killed it when there was bipartisan support because he thought it gave him a little political advantage to kill it.
Everybody, please subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube. It's called Talking Feds. Search now Talking Feds and tell Harry I say hello. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to add the MeidasTouch podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new updates every single day.